Hi, I'm Erin, and this is a follow-up video to the video that I posted recently about exclusion and inclusion and bullying. This is a personal example, and again, it's sort of reflective of my own parenting and my own, well, not just mine, but my son's learning as well. So, our family was out for dinner with several of our friends, and my son was acting really strange. He was asking if he could use the crayons on the table to color. Yeah, go ahead, that's what they're there for. He was asking if he could play with the Lego that he brought. Yes, that's why you brought it. And towards the end of the night, I noticed that he was acting just really clingy, really insecure, just not himself. As we were driving home, he started crying, and turns out that one of the kids who was there wasn't letting him play, or I don't even know what the kids were doing. They weren't exactly running around the restaurant, but he wasn't allowed to sort of join in with whatever the other kids were doing. And the reason he was given for not being allowed to join in was, just that kid stuff that doesn't make sense. He was told that he was, well, he actually wasn't even told that. He thought it was because he was too tall. So, I tried to talk about it with him, but he didn't really want to. He was feeling really hurt. And I think because he was feeling so hurt, I was left, thinking about it a lot, and I brought it up with a friend of mine. And she gave me some really good advice. She actually said, while it really sucks to experience that, you don't actually want to protect him from those experiences. Sometimes life has those really hard moments, and you don't want to shield him from life. You actually just want to help him navigate it. And in the moment when she said that, I was like, no, I actually think I do want to protect him from that. But after I reflected a little bit more on my own, and I thought about my own experiences with inclusion and exclusion, and my own needs for making sure that my son was happy, I started to realize that she was probably right. That while it might have been really hard to watch him feel upset, it wasn't my place to step in and sort of control the situation for him. So, skip ahead now to learning in the woods. My son is playing with a group of kids. My son is, I guess, the youngest in this group of three. And they're in a fort, and then along comes a 4-year-old. And the 4-year-old starts to throw mud bombs at the fort. I happened to see the start of the mud bombing, and I thought, ooh, I don't know if that's going to go over that well. So I just sat down on the bank and observed for a little bit. And as soon as I sat down on the bank, the 4-year-old looked at me and gave a big grin. And I'm not sure if he gave a big grin because he was just happy I was there, or if he was happy because I was there and he thought that I might help. But pretty quickly I realized, okay, I better start sportscasting because I can see the kids in the fort are getting upset at the mud being thrown at their fort. So I start sportscasting, and I'm not very far into my sportscasting when the little guy, the 4-year-old, gives me a big grin. I think he feels reassured that I'm seeing the situation from his perspective. And one of the bigger kids in the fort, the 6-year-old, turns to me, or actually doesn't even turn to me. He says, "You'd better stop throwing mud at my fort. You're never allowed in this fort ever again. And if you continue to throw mud, I'm going to get you in trouble." And then he sort of looks at me from the corner of his eye just to make sure that, I had heard him and that I agreed that mud throwing at people was definitely something that you shouldn't do. So I continued to sportscast, but as soon a dragonfly just landed on my arm. As soon as I as soon as I sort of got through that interaction, my son hops up and runs away. I'm not really paying much attention to what he's doing, but he runs away. He very shortly comes back, and he has a bucket. And he says to the 4-year-old, "I know, why don't you throw mud bombs at our fort? And this bucket is going to be the shield, and I'm going to be in charge of the shield, and I'm going to catch your mud bombs in my shield and protect the fort." And the 4-year-old's eyes lit up. You know, he suddenly was included in this big kid game, and he could continue to throw the mud balls. And the big kids in the fort, they were fine with that because, you know, they no longer had to worry about getting splattered with mud. And my son felt really good too because he found a way to include the 4-year-old while respecting what the big kids wanted, and he had come up with it by himself. That was a real big learning moment for me because it's so tempting as an adult to step in and be a little bit more direct with kids and sort of lead them or guide them in the direction that you think they should go. As an adult, I never would have come up with that playful idea about using a bucket shield. That was totally kid-derived. I think it was important that I was there and that I sportscasted because the sportscasting made everyone feel heard. Their voices were and opinions were acknowledged, but I wasn't so involved that I directed them as to what they should do. My son was actually able to think for himself and come up with his own solution and felt pretty good about it. So while it might be really tricky to step back and to let kids experience exclusion, I actually think my son was able to include the 4-year-old because he knew what it was like to be excluded. He was sensitive to that because he had experienced it himself. So yeah, that's my personal example about inclusion, exclusion, and yeah, thanks for watching.